Hi there and welcome to Upskilling Life. Let's take a look step by step at how the STL files we downloaded in a previous video are sliced, arranged and then printed into 3D resin form. We will then take a look at some settings in Lychee, and when we finally come to printing, I'll show you two simple settings to tweak as we reduce the print time on this print from 12 hours down to 4. Let's go get started.
So here we are in Lychee, resin 3D printer slicer. So this is what you'll look at when you first get in here. As you can see, mine's already set up for my printer. But what you'll first need to do is look at this 3D printer option up here and set in your printer. And they have a pretty comprehensive list of printers. And your resin settings. This will generally come off the guidelines for the bottle of resin that you've bought, or the bottle of resin that's come with your 3D printer. So a number of layers on the bottom, and then the exposure time. So this gives us essentially that plate for the rest of our print to stick to, which is why these 5 layers get a longer exposure time to the UV light, make them a bit stronger and really adhere to that build plate. Then the rest of the layers of the model from there. This is our thickness. So this is the definition of your model. The smaller this number is, the more layers there are and the higher definition it is. 0.05 of a millimeter is a pretty general rule for high detail, good quality. Can go higher detail, but of course the higher the detail, the more layers there are and the longer it's going to take to print. Light off delay, which is pretty standard. This will come with the printer. Again, once you've set your printer up, it will set a load of defaults. Have a run with these defaults and then move it from there. Light off display, exposure time, how far the build plate's going to lift off the FEP, which is the layer between your build plate and the screen, some of the speeds, and our compensation. Burn in layers once this is set and you're getting reliable prints, you won't need to change it. Again, the only time you probably want to change some of these exposure, the layer settings, is to achieve a higher definition print, which if you're printing in a very small scale, this is a good option. If you're printing in the 75mm scale or the busts or anything sort of larger, 0.05 is fine. And exposure time is one that you will need to keep an eye on. This is one of the ones you'll generally tweak as temperatures change, humidity increases, seasons happen, these environmental factors that can affect your printing. The exposure time is where you're going to be making those alterations to compensate. So I will look at pulling in our Minotaur bust and we'll see from there. Okay, let's have a look at importing our bust. Now, I may have been a bit ambitious thinking we were going to fit all of those models on here. Here I've loaded all 3 pieces of the bust on. I can highlight one piece here, use my move button, and we will just slide him back out of the way. Here is the fun part, very much like a jigsaw, trying to utilize the space as best we can. So what I'm doing is just twisting to make sure I've got everything inside the build volume to do. The hollow files I downloaded from Loot have come pre-supported. You can already see the support structures in the models themselves. This is great. I've found Loot pretty reliable with these supports. See what else we can load in here. So you can see there's a section sticking out. We're going to print that, that will be fine. So here is my loaded build plate. Still has a bit of room. Even here we can see the difference in scales. And really get in here and have a look at some of the detail on this model. Even the 32mm. The model itself, highly detailed. So from here it comes down to your settings to what we can reproduce. Getting things like his toenails, maybe the difference between going to between 0.05mm and 0.01mm. So from here we have a loaded build plate. This particular print I'm going to be trying a different color resin than I have before, so it will be a little bit of a trial to check that the settings work. So Thingiverse, good place to find configuration files for your printers. Go on there and search for Amber Lab City configuration file. This is great for resin printers. And the reason this is such a small file is so that it can print very quick if you're just doing the calibration itself. If we zoom right in on here, we can see it's just made up of a whole lot of different shapes in the form of a city, and all of these different aspects can give you some hints and tips to how your printer is performing once it's printed. And once it's printed, we'll be looking at things like the gaps in between the buildings. Are they welded together from the printer, or have they printed the gap? How well is it defined the pins? Have things like this little spire printed? Has it printed the cross in the middle? And all these little features, we want to make sure it's printing it all. Can we see the H on top or not? But it's such a small file on the build plate that it can be worth throwing that into a corner if you have room, and that will give you an indication when you printed your print. If you've had some fails on it, having that configuration file printed at the same time with that batch of prints will give you some idea as to what might have gone wrong. And if your configuration file is printed fine and you've had faults, it may come down to the supports. If your configuration file hasn't printed fine, then there may be some places you can tweak to eliminate that fail. So we have all of these in place on the build plate. I have them positioned. I haven't mirrored or duplicated anything. Now here, a little bit of extra information. At this point, I can click down here and get an estimation. It's going to take 9 hours 46. We'll do an estimation on the resin, so we're looking at probably 200 mils, and all up, the highest part is 117 millimeters, which will be the top of his horns. And what dictates the speed of a 3D resin print is the height. So if I was to just print this itself, it would take the same amount of time as me printing this whole build plate, because this is my tallest model. This is dictating how long my print will take, which is why it's worth hacking out your build plate and throwing some of those extra models you wanted to print on there as well at the same time. Now when we jump into actually printing this, I'll show you my one secret setting I tweak to achieve a lot faster prints with my resin printer. I've managed to achieve prints that have been estimated at 16 hours down to 6 hours. So I'll share that with you soon. But for now, we'll move on to the prepare side of things. And here, I'm happy with these, but these are some of the settings you can change. Raft, I was talking in particular about the raft at the bottom between the build plate and the supports. The supports we can change, especially if we're adding some of our own. And the hollow. In my experience, I've found Lychee to be very sensitive A lot of things it throws up as errors, you can print it fine without any errors. With Loot, basically whatever errors it throws up, I'm pretty confident to hit print and that I'll get my prints out of it. So here in the prepare side of things, I've selected all my files. We're going to go down to this island detector. Search selected. So we can scroll through one by one. You can see this arrow on the side here has the red marks as well. It's another way to pinpoint it. So it can also, while we're in this view, much like we could have a look with the FDM, this is the very bottom layer. So here is our rafts, starts on the supports. Now we can start to see our models printing onto the top of the supports. There, our configuration file is finished. Here we can see inside of our bust. So there's some drainage holes on the bottom, just around there. See those drainage holes? That's so that this big section here doesn't turn into a huge cup and create suction on the FEP. That's to let air in and out, and also helps when we turn the model over after it's printed. Any uncured resin inside the model can run out these drain holes as well. So here we can see it slowly. We can run a proximity. No supports are colliding. And if you happen to have unsupported models, you would be generating auto supports, and you would probably have to put in your own holes, drainage holes as well. Again, really good models from Loot. I'm happy with those. We're just going to go to print. So here is where my printer is. It's giving me some notices here, and it thinks I should have some more drainage holes. Anti-aliasing, I'm not too worried about myself. PWMX is the file that my Anycubic Mono X needs. This will be different for different types of printers, and we'll export it to Slice. So here we can see it slicing. And this is basically fast forward of every layer that my screen will print. And one of the biggest parts with these settings, as daunting as they are, starting with your basic default settings and then having the confidence to experiment with some of them, start tweaking your prints. So here we can see everything sliced and finished. I've got an estimated time, estimated amount of volume, how much it'll cost me roughly, and it's been exported to my external hard drive ready to go into the printer. So let's take it from here and get to printing. Here we are at layer 29 out of 2,345, and there's still 11 hours and 49 minutes to go. We're at 1%. We've gone through that initial burn layer, and you'll see here when the screen comes back on, we're only on for about 2 seconds now, and then it's back off, whereas before it was staying on for that 25 seconds. So now the layers are a lot quicker, but we've still got thousands to go. So this setting I'm going to show you, I'd initially played with in Lychee, and changed it in my programming, sent it to the printer, but it wasn't until a little bit further in my journey with 3D printing that I found out that my printer had been staying on its default speed, which is why I hadn't been seeing much of a change. So we go into the menu here, and most of you should be able to change this just through your slicer. But as you can see here, the settings, this is what's been imported in with the print itself. And we have our Z lift speed and Z retract speed at 1 millimeter per second. So the speed at which it's pulling itself off the plate and moving back down onto the film to do the next layer. is moving at 1mm per second, and we are lifting 6mm. So it's going to take 12 seconds just to pull all the way up and then go all the way back down. Now this is a new resin that I haven't tried before, so I'm not going to push it too far. But I have found a pretty safe bet is we'll put in 10. So I've now changed the Z lift speed and the retract speed to 10mm per second. Return. We can see now we've cut our time down to 4 hours. You'll see the time in between the screen coming on and off is also a lot quicker. I've had success with experimenting with the setting. I've printed successfully some very detailed pieces at 20mm per second, which seems to be, as far as this will let me change it through this menu. So a really big part of my journey, especially through learning slicing and a lot of the printer settings and tweaking of my files, comes from some of the online communities. So don't overlook these places for inspiration, hints, tips, technical support with your printer. There's a wealth of information and knowledgeable people that are all too happy to help you out. So my Loop subscription also includes access into their members only group. So a lot of the painting ideas and inspiration comes from the group. Great for some of the settings that they have used to achieve some of the results they have. I've seen some of the guys on there with some insane builds, scaling up some of the 3D models from Loot into life-size prints that look fantastic, absolutely amazing. And Anycubic Chiron owners forum on Facebook, they've been invaluable for learning some of the tweaks and setting changes I can use on my FDM printer to get it printing a lot better than it was. But definitely don't overlook the value of community. So we found ourselves with some prints hot off the printer, about 4 hours print time. We've got our Minotaur, which as you can see was printed in separate parts. Detail's nice, the lift speed wasn't a problem, haven't had any issues. As you would have seen, there was a few supports to remove. And just to give you an idea of our other prints that we did for our scale, we've got our little 75mm guy, our little 32mm guy. So this is the difference in scale with the models when you choose them. 75mm, a little bit better for painting. The details are a bit bigger. You can move your brush in there. The smaller pieces, good for gaming. Generally what they're used for is tabletop gaming. And just to give you a scale of our humanoids, our 75 and our 32mm scale. These printed off fine, no issues. You'll notice once you've cleaned it up, you may go back and see a couple more supports that you missed, some of the really tiny ones. One of the issues I did have with my prints was removing the supports off this guy. Supposed to have the back of his staff broke off when I was removing the supports, and my big fat thumb also flicked off the tassel, which is supposed to be on there. So if you see when you're removing supports that you do break a piece of the model off, which is very easy to do. Spiders, arachnids, anything with tiny little fidgety bits can be broken off with support sometimes. Save the pieces, cure them, and then it's just a matter of either super gluing or using some green stuff, epoxy putty, to glue them back on, and you can recover the file. The process we've gone through, our recent prints, we've downloaded our STL file, we've opened it up in Lychee, we've sliced it, set the exposure settings, as that's what determines your print. Your lift speed, if you want to increase the speed of the print, throwing it through to the USB card, loaded it on the printer, printed it, a little bit of post-production cleanup. So if you find
that you're not too sure on how to get yourself one of these models and what you need to start producing them, check out one of my previous videos where I go into exactly what you need to start 3D printing high quality models like this. And there's a follow-up to that on how to paint them. So check out that video. Like and subscribe if you want to be part of this lifelong learning community. Stay tuned for more. Thanks.